How you doing this morning?
Good.
Doing good. It's good to see you. You look good. You're looking good. My name is Chris. I'm one of the pastors here at the Upper Room Fellowship. If you got a Bible, you can go ahead and flip open to Ecclesiastes chapter 4. While you're flipping there, let me kind of set us up a little bit for what Solomon's going to be talking to us about this morning. So in the beginning, God created you for community. So God created humanity to walk in deep, meaningful relationships. And so what Solomon is going to be doing today is he's kind of looking around under the sun, and he's realizing that the good life cannot be lived alone, right? Life was never designed to be lived in isolation, in individualism. God created us for relationship with him and relationship with each other. So much so that the first thing that God ever critiques anything in all of creation is in the book of Genesis, when God says it's not good for man to be alone. Right? It says Adam was lonely. Why was Adam lonely? Adam wasn't lonely because he was imperfect. Adam was lonely because he was perfect. Right? The perfect state of man or woman is in friendship, relationship, and community. Adam was lonely because he was like God, and God exists in relationship. And the problem is, the very good God, the very good creation that God made, with humans living in perfect, wonderful relationship with each other and God, that lasts for about a page before Genesis chapter 3 rolls around, and sin, the fall, enters the picture. And immediately, the first effect of sin, the first visible, tangible effect of sin is broken relationships, right? So in chapter 3, God shows up, and you've got Adam and Eve hiding. They're ashamed. They're pointing fingers at each other. They're blame shifting. Immediately, you've got sin ripping relationships apart. And we continue to see this happening. And I'm not going to go through all of them because I'm sure you've seen them. But statistics show that isolation and individualism is on the rise in America in every way. Right? And I'll just tell you one stat that kind of really hit me this week. Statistics now show that outside of their immediate family, well over half of all Americans said, I don't have a single friend that I know, that I could trust, that I could talk to if life was hard. And that is the social, cultural effects of sin on relationships. And so what we're going to see here in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 is Solomon. He's going to be observing and just kind of mourning the reality of how sin breaks human community and relationships. And it's going to be a little bit of a painful read. To be honest, I like Ecclesiastes. I'm kind of excited to be done with it at some point. But it's really kind of this helpful and honest read because this hasn't changed since he wrote it. And here Solomon's going to look at kind of 6 different community killers that destroy relationships and community. We'll walk through these and then we'll just kind of end with some hope, hopefully. So let's dive into verse 1. Solomon starts. He said, again, I observed all the acts of oppression being done under the sun. So he's looking at humans sin against each other and hurt each other. And he says, look at the tears of those who are oppressed. They have no one to comfort them. Power is with those who oppress them. They have no one to comfort them. So I commended the dead who had already died, more than the living who are still alive. But better than either of them is the one who has not yet existed. Okay, take it easy, Solomon. Who has not seen the evil activity that is done under the sun. So like I said, like an uplifting read on this beautiful Sunday morning. Okay, here's the first thing that Solomon sees destroying human relationships. Objectification. Objectification. Solomon's looking around. Everywhere he looks, he sees people hurting and using and abusing each other. And just in general, treating each other like objects who exist for my comfort and my joy and my pleasure. That's objectification. When you look at another human being and you treat them like an object or like a commodity that exists for you. Solomon in verse 2 and 3, he says, man, this thing can get so bad, it'll like make you not want to live on planet Earth, right? And some of you can relate with this, because for some of you, I'm sure, your biggest struggle with God is, God, if you're all good and you're all powerful, why do you keep letting evil human beings keep doing this stuff to each other? Why do you let this suffering exist? And Solomon gets that. Solomon says, man, the dead might be better off than the living because they don't have to observe this mess on planet Earth. Like humans do some terrible, unimaginable things to each other. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental and emotional abuse. And Solomon's looking at this and he's like, what's wrong with us? And I'm sure plenty of folks in our church family have personally experienced some of the extremes of pain and hurt and oppression and objectification. But really, this even happens at a more everyday level, right? To where we don't really even think about each other as human beings with souls at times. We think of each other as objects. So here's an example. Go back to middle school real quick, okay? Maybe you've spent years trying not to think about middle school. We're going to go there today, okay? Go back. Here's the thing. I don't know where most of you went to middle school, but I can tell you what happened there. Because the same thing happened at all of them. In middle school, around 6th grade, some of the students become more popular than others, right? For whatever reason, the ocean of hormones does them a favor. They're maybe a little bit more attractive, maybe a little bit more athletic, a little cooler. For whatever reason, they become the popular crowd. This happened at your middle school? Yeah? No? Yeah, okay. Good. And then along with their popularity came a certain social status and a certain social power and clout, right? You can answer. Yes? Okay. Yeah. Then did this happen? Did the popular crowd then use that social power and clout to serve and help those who weren't as popular? No. They did. Instead, they used their power to push down and pick on those who had less, right? The people who had the ability to help those who didn't have as much as them, they didn't do that. Instead, they picked on them and they oppressed them. It happens in every middle school everywhere. And the problem is, it's as if middle school just keeps happening to all of us in different ways. It's like we can't escape this temptation to look at other human beings and decide how valuable they are based on the question, how useful are they to me? And for whatever reason, so society has deemed certain people to just not be as useful as others. And they get objectified. And they get oppressed. And it's busted. It's not right. So let me make this real practical, all right? Many of you are going to go to lunch immediately after church. Here's what will happen sometimes at a restaurant. I'm sure you've all experienced it. You'll have that waiter or waitress who's not only bad at their job, but they just like have an attitude the whole time. Like you're in their way, and they would be having just a nice day at work if you wouldn't have come in and ruined it, right? You know what I'm talking about? And I'm going to be really honest today. When I get one of those waiters or waitresses, do you know what my first reaction is every time? It is, well, they're going to feel my frustration. And they're not going to get tipped as much. Anybody will? Yeah? Okay. Now, I'm getting better at getting over that. But where I want to get to is that my first reaction is, this waiter or waitress is a human being with a soul. And maybe there's something going on in their world that is crazy broken. And maybe rather than tip less, what they need is a bigger tip. Maybe rather than my scorn and my frustration, maybe what they need is my love and kindness. But that's tough, because we are tempted to objectify people. You exist for me. I'm paying you money. You better deliver. You're here to serve me. And this is not how God created human beings to interact with each other. Community killer number 1 is objectification. Keep reading, verse 4. I saw that all labor and all skillful work is due to one person's envy of another. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. The second sin that Solomon observes that destroys relationships is envy. So many places in Ecclesiastes, Solomon speaks in hyperbole. This is one of those places. He says envy drives all our work and all our toil. That's hyperbole. But what he's saying is that's how common envy is. And envy is a sinful attitude that says, whatever you have in your life, I deserve to have it too. So if you got success, you got skill, you got talent or good looks or just a charmed life or a good situation or good relationship or whatever you have, I deserve to have it too. But then envy takes it even one step further. And it's not just that I deserve to have what you have, but also that I deserve to have it more than you. So I'm kind of a little bit against you now. You're kind of my enemy now. Because you make me feel bad, right? Because I deserve it more than you. And here's what's really interesting. Social scientists at 2 different universities in Germany have now found that the primary emotion that is triggered by sites like Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram is the emotion of envy. It's the primary thing that we feel while we've got a little downtime and we're scrolling through social media. There are other emotions going on, but the primary emotion we feel is, I deserve that more than them. That charmed life that they're displaying on this social media website. Have you ever had that moment where somebody just got some bad news, but it's not just somebody, it's like that guy, right? He's so pretty, and he just acts happy all the time, and he's so good at everything in life, and he always gets good news, and he gets a little bit of bad news, and some little part of you goes, good. Right? Maybe you've never done that, but you know a guy who does that sometimes, right? Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe when somebody gets good news, you just can't rejoice with them. Like, they find out they're pregnant, they find out they're getting married, getting a promotion, they come into some money, some good news comes in their life. Like some of us, we've mastered this fake face where we go, oh yeah, I'm happy for you. No, I'm not. That's what you're feeling inside. No, I'm not. It's envy, and it damages community. When you are envious of someone else, you cannot walk in real community with them. Keep reading, verse 5. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. The third sin that Solomon observes that destroys relationships is laziness. Now let me explain what this verse means, because this verse is interesting, right? Fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Okay, so Solomon again is using hyperbole in observing that there are people in life who they like fold their hands to pray, like at a meal, right? That's the picture he's describing. And as they fold their hands to pray, to bless the meal, there's no food on the table because they didn't work to prepare the food to put it on the table. Like, oh, there's no food, I'm praying, I'm ready to eat, there's no food, I don't want to get up to get some food, I got my arm right here, I'm just going to eat that. That's the picture. It's ridiculous. I love it. It's a word picture of laziness. I'm not going to put forth any effort. And Solomon says, this destroys relationships. So here's the reality. Deep, meaningful relationships take some effort. True? Relationships take effort. You got to schedule. You got to carve out some time to get together and make it happen. But even when you are together, it still takes effort. Engaging, asking questions, being present, really listening to people. This is why maybe you found yourself in a room of people you like, who you would call friends, and everybody's got their phone out. And they're reading an article, or they're playing a game, right? Or you see a family out to eat, sitting at a table on their phones, ignoring each other. That's fascinating, right? Relational laziness is a constant temptation. And this is the third thing that damages relationships. Keep reading, verse 6. Better one handful with rest than 2 handfuls with effort in a pursuit of the wind. Again, I saw futility under the sun. There's a person without a companion, without even a son or brother, and though there is no end to all his struggles, his eyes are still not content with riches. Who am I struggling for, he asks, and depriving myself of good things? This too is futile and a miserable task. The fourth community killer that Solomon observes on planet Earth is excessive busyness. Excessive busyness. He says, as I look at people and the way that they interact with each other, I've noticed that there are some humans who overcram their schedule. Who are so busy they don't even realize they don't even have time left for people. They don't have any real time to build real relationships. And the thing about real relationships is they take time. I don't care what your love language is, all relationships require some quality time to build. I think in America, the trap of over-busying ourselves might be one of the sneakiest, most common temptations for all of us. And please hear me, okay? I'm not coming down hard on you. I'm not going to wade into the complexity of your life. I know you got stuff to do. It's great stuff to do. You got kids, they got stuff to do too, and maybe you're like helping somebody out, and that takes time. And it's all good things. It's all good stuff. That's always the problem with busyness, right? It's always good stuff. But for a lot of people, the temptation is to say yes to everything, to over-busy the schedule. And I will say there is the other side of this where culture has made busyness a status symbol, and we now equate being busy with leading a life of significance. So studies show that a large portion of people think that they're busier than they are. So I think we have to ask ourselves really honestly, like, how big is my plate, and do I have too much on it? I love us enough just to encourage us and push us and nudge us a little bit to take time to build real, deep, meaningful relationships. If for some reason you tell yourself, I don't have time for community and relationships, there is a misprioritization going on there. Yeah. Either you are overestimating how busy you are, or you really are too busy. Now, I'm not mad at us. Solomon's not mad at us. He's just going, relationships are too important and too beautiful for you to miss out on. Fifth, go to verse 9. He says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either falls, his companion can lift him up. But pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. Also, if two lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person alone keep warm? If someone overpowers one person, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Someone's just kind of saying, like, you were created for relationships. You're created for this. You are designed to be in community, in deep, life-giving relationships. Now, I love it because he uses really simple math. Bible math is pretty easy. Solomon's like, which one's bigger, 1 or 2? 2. Okay, 2's better than 1. And what he's doing is he's writing to a culture that's Middle Eastern. They live in a desert. And he says, you know, when you go out in the dark, there's pits. They would dig pits to catch animals. And he says, man, you go out in the dark alone, you fall in a pit, you're done. There's nobody to help you. The other thing about the desert, super hot during the day, really cold at night. If you've ever been camping and it's gotten really cold at night, it's amazing how our space barriers just melt away. You'll be in your sleeping bag just like cuddled up with somebody in their sleeping bag just to stay warm. Here's what Solomon's doing. Solomon throughout the book, keeps coming back to the reality that we live in a broken place. This is a good world gone bad. And that means there's going to be seasons of your life, dark seasons of your life. And Solomon's going, man, how terrible would it be for a dark season to come for you and you'd be all alone? How terrible would it be for you either to have not put in the effort, or you've accidentally busied yourself so much that no one was there for you when you fell in a pit? He's saying, don't miss it. It's too valuable. I have one last community killer that he describes in the last verses of this chapter. I'm going to go ahead and give it to you so that you can be thinking about it while we read these verses. So community killer number 6 is narcissistic inflexibility. All right, let's read the verses and then we'll get into it. Verse 13. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led, yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and a striving after wind. Narcissistic inflexibility. Solomon tells this little anecdote, this little real life rags to riches story about this poor street kid who's actually was a very smart street kid. But he wound up in prison, and he gets out of prison, and he uses this wisdom, and he actually climbs all the way to becoming the king of a foreign land. This rags to riches story. But the problem is, once he becomes king, a self-centered arrogance starts to set into his soul, where he's no longer able to receive advice. That's how Solomon describes it. He succeeds in every way. He goes from poor and wise to rich and powerful, and he can't take any help or any advice from anybody else. This is narcissistic inflexibility. Narcissism is this self-consumed love of yourself, an unreasonably high sense of your own importance. It's where you think you're awesome. And you think all your ideas and plans are awesome. So why doesn't everybody realize that and do what I want them to do? That's narcissism. Inflexibility is, I'm unwilling to hear or to heed your advice or your help or your input. Narcissistic inflexibility. I know better, so I don't need your help, I don't need your advice, I'm just fine on my own. And for some of you, maybe this marks your heart. Someone comes to you, I think this is maybe a little bit off in your life. No, it's not, I'm fine. Or like you turn it around on them. Like, hey, this decision that you're about to make, I don't think it's a good decision. Oh, really? You want me to pull out a whole list of the bad decisions you've ever made in your life? Right? This thing really tears relationships apart. Because nobody can get close to you. And I don't know all of you, but there's enough people in this room that I would guess there are some in here who, people for years and years have patiently tried to love you and help you and just cannot live in community with them. Because you cannot admit the possibility that you might be wrong. And you can't take advice. So don't forget who's writing this to us. Solomon, the wisest human being who ever lived on the face of the planet. If anyone in all of human history could have gotten by without other people's help and advice, it's Solomon. And he says, only a vain fool won't take people's advice. Only a vain fool is so full of themselves that they won't accept other people's input. You got to watch out for narcissistic inflexibility. It'll mess you up. It'll ruin relationships. And here's the thing about all these. Here's what's at the root of all these things. The root of all these is self-centeredness, right? That's the heart of it all. The root of envy is you can't have more than me. The root of laziness or excessive busyness is self-centeredness. If loving you or hanging out with you or building a relationship with you infringes on what I want to do or my schedule, then sorry, no. It's the heart of inflexibility. My ideas are awesome, and you should probably just do all my ideas. Self-centeredness. It is the root of all the sins that are constantly tearing apart relationships. And Solomon, in his wisdom, sees this and is warning us about it. Self-centeredness. And then Jesus comes along, and Jesus gathers his disciples, and he tells them, and he tells us, I got one thing that's going to mark you. There's one thing that is going to be the primary thing that distinguishes you and sets you apart as my people. And this is what he says in John 13, 34 through 35. He says, I give you a new command. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Jesus is saying, essentially, Solomon's right. This is a good world gone bad, and people are constantly falling for the sinful temptation of self-centeredness. But, Jesus says, not so with my followers. Not so with you. That's not how you're going to look. It's not what your life's going to be marked by. It's not what your community is going to be marked by. You're going to be marked by selfless love for one another. Jesus says, as I have loved you, you are to love one another. What is Jesus' greatest demonstration of love? The cross, right? The cross is your example. In the same way I have selflessly loved you and cared for you and was concerned about you and served you by going to the cross, that is going to be the picture of what your whole life should look like, Jesus said. Jesus goes so far as to say that as you love others, that's how you love me. He says, serving others, by loving others, by caring for others, by bending your busy schedule to accommodate others, by laying down your desire to sit on the couch and watch other people participate in community. And instead, with zeal and with energy, engage people and care about people, Jesus says, that's how you're going to show love for me. Being a follower of Jesus is inescapably communal. And the more individualized it becomes, the more difficult or impossible it is to mature into a disciple of Jesus. Like even in our individual pursuits, what begins to happen is that we kind of acquire all this kind of knowledge, but we have no real way to do something with it. So in the end, even with our theological brilliance, we can be really cold, hard-hearted people. who never weep or rejoice with others. And I know this idea of really walking together in selfless, close way is difficult. Because part of it is we have to deal with our own issues. You got to get deep with others, right? You get in a close community, and your own issues will boil up to the top. And most people don't want to deal with their own garbage. So we tend to put this barrier around ourselves and pretend. And the thing is, you can be a part of a small group community and still pretend. Right? Say things like, I was reading the Bible the other day. And by the other day, you mean 1987. You know? Small groups in biblical community are not synonymous. It will have to be real community, real relations will have to be pursued, prioritized. You don't have to sacrifice for it. But once you get it, it's beautiful. When you read through Ecclesiastes, you see probably a dozen times that to cook and to eat a good dinner, drink good drink with God-loving friends is a holy thing. The Bible says dinner, friends, good food, that's holy. We're gonna have to fight for community. It's becoming more and more countercultural. Is that going to be uncomfortable? Yes, if it's done correctly. Is it going to be easy? No, not if it's done correctly. Are you always going to enjoy it? Nope. Sometimes you'll rather sit on the couch. Is your personal preference going to have to go by the wayside constantly? Is it worth it? Absolutely. For our growth and health and pursuit of Jesus. And Jesus promises, he says, you start learning how to love each other like I have loved you, people are going to be drawn to it. It'll be attractive. People are going to want to know about me when they see how you guys love each other because of how I've loved you. And then they get to join the family of God. And that's beautiful. Francis Schaeffer said this. He says, our relationship with each other is the criterion the world uses to judge whether our message is truthful. Christian community is the final apologetic. And honestly, I think I pray about this more for our church family as much as anything else. That our church family would be this beautiful kind of community that shines to a world and says, man, there must be something going on in there. Because I've never experienced relationships like that. And I want to be in on that. Amen? Okay. Let me pray for you. The ministry team wants to come forward. They'll be up here after I pray. They'd love to pray for you for any reason. If you want a blessing, if you have a physical, mental, spiritual, financial thing going on, come get prayed for. All right. Let me pray for you. God, just thank you for the cross where you demonstrated your selfless love. And Lord, convict us. Give us the courage to be honest about where we are relationally lazy or unwilling to be flexible or to bend our busyness in order to carve margins into our lives where we can really love other people. Lord, would you just give us your forgiveness and your love to be able to persevere and extend grace with broken people the way that you've extended grace with us and been patient with us. Lord, just form us more fully into a beautiful, attractive community. Would you give us a love for each other that draws people in and draws people to you? It's in your precious name that we pray. Everybody said, Amen. Amen.